This one's going to be a little bit different, so please bear with me. I also wanted to do an introduction if you're new here. Hello, I'm Eli. I am a trans artist from Colorado. I like making cute queer art, and I have been selling my artwork at conventions and artist alleys for over a decade at this point. Years ago, I was at the Denver Museum of Nature and Science with some friends, and I genuinely don't remember if this was part of a temporary exhibit or if it was part of their permanent Egyptian collection, but there was a female mummy that had been entombed in a male sarcophagus, and all of the written information about it on display was baffling. Whoever had written it was trying to jump through so many hoops to try to explain why the sarcophagus and the mummy within were two different sexes. Did the mummy have to be buried in a hand-me-down sarcophagus? Was the family of the mummy unable to afford a new sarcophagus and had to use whatever was available? Did the embalmers and priests and countless other people involved in this burial somehow make a mistake? Or maybe, I realized, this person was just trans. It was an exhausting and infuriating realization for me, especially in a museum, a place meant to encourage science and logic and study and so many other wonderful things. Granted, this was years ago, and I have no idea if any of that information has been changed or if the sarcophagus in question is even still there, but it lit a fire in me to search for any and all historical evidence of transgender people, especially now in a time where our identities and history are actively being destroyed and erased. It is important to know that, yes, we have always been here. So please join me in discovering the beautiful, horrible, fascinating, and human history of transgender people in this series that I am going to be calling Trans Figures of History. In this series, I want to share the history of transgender people and paint their portraits as a way to honor our history. I'm not trying to prove our existence to transphobes because there will never be enough evidence to convince them. Rather, learning that transgender people have always existed has been incredibly healing and empowering for me, and I want to share that feeling with my trans siblings. There will always be people who deny explicit evidence of our existence, or claim that we don't have enough evidence, or that we're making it all up. The historical figures I want to share don't necessarily refer to themselves as transgender for a number of reasons. The word didn't necessarily exist during their time, or a different word was being used, and many of those words today are slurs, or gender exploration was an ingrained part of their culture and beliefs, or it wasn't considered unique enough to even record. The historical figures I want to share are the people who, to me, are the trans equivalent of the "they were roommates" thing, where archaeologists will discover an obviously queer couple and determine that there's no possibility they could have been anything other than platonic. So these figures that I want to talk about are the ones that historians look at and tie themselves into knots, trying to explain away any gender identity discrepancies. Meanwhile, a trans person might look at these figures and say, hey, that's like me. I very much want to be as accurate as I possibly can when discussing trans figures of history, because queerness and transness is inextricably linked with intersectionality. Pride today simply would not exist without trans women of color like Miss Major and Sylvia Rivera and Marsha P. Johnson. I also realize this is not fair that I'm the one talking about any of this. I am a white, cis-passing trans man, but this is something I'm really passionate about, and maybe I can use my privilege to make people fucking listen. I want to be upfront with trying to be as historically accurate as possible, because there are so many wonderful trans people who were activists and tried to make the world a better place, or just wanted to live their lives in peace. But there are also those who were racist and sexist and ableist and generally horrible human beings, because it's history and that happens. So, a general blanket statement that being trans is not an excuse to be an asshole. This is something I would honestly love some input on as far as how to handle this. I want to present everything as accurately as I possibly can, but I don't really feel great about making art of historical shitty people. I talked to some of my friends who are also trans about this, and they suggested talking about the bad figures honestly, but not necessarily making art of them. Let me know what you think. I would love to hear y'all's thoughts on this. Additionally, I will have to simplify a lot of things and leave out a lot of details with these discussions, because otherwise these videos are going to end up being hours long, and I don't want to do that. I will be sharing all my sources if you would like to take a look and do further research yourself, but my goal is to do justice with these videos without yapping forever. Anyway, now that I have been yapping forever, I just want to share some trans historical figures and make some cool art. So let's go. You'll have to forgive me if my lighting is changing here because we're no longer on daylight savings time. So it is dark at 4 p.m. and I hate it here. Today we are going to be talking about Elagabalus, the trans Roman emperor. Elagabalus was born in 204 CE, and their rule lasted from May 16th, 218 CE, to their assassination on March 13th, 222 CE. They ruled from ages 14 to 18. Elagabalus is also a name that was given to them posthumously, and I will be using they/them pronouns to refer to them because their gender is so highly debated. The specific sculpture I referenced for this portrait is a marble bust currently housed at the Musei Capitolini in Rome. There's a little bit of background information to know about the state of Rome prior to when Elagabalus came into power. Elagabalus was the cousin of Emperor Caracalla, who ruled from 198 CE to 217 CE. As a part of many violent wars, Caracalla ran an unsuccessful campaign against the Parthian Empire, which resulted in Rome paying the Parthians huge sums of war reparations. Serving under Caracalla was Macrinus, who had Caracalla murdered and then declared himself emperor. Macrinus had Caracalla's remaining family members exiled, which included Elagabalus, their mother, aunt, cousin, and grandmother. Because of all of the debt that Caracalla incurred from war campaigns, Macrinus unsuccessfully had to deal with economic turmoil. Elagabalus's grandmother, Julia Maesa, used the unrest to her advantage to put one of her grandchildren on the throne. Elagabalus and Caracalla were part of a prominent Syrian Arab family that ruled during the Severan dynasty. When Elagabalus came to Rome, they brought with them all of their Eastern traditions and customs, which Romans saw as barbaric, effeminate, excessive, and hedonistic. This would ultimately lead to Elagabalus's downfall. Elagabalus served as the head priest of the Syrian sun god Elagabal, where Elagabalus's alias comes from. Elagabalus wanted to unite Roman and Syrian religious beliefs, and as a part of numerous religious edicts, assimilated their sun god with the Roman sun god, renaming it Deus Sol Invictus, meaning God of the undefeated sun. Elagabalus demanded their god be worshipped above Jupiter, much to public displeasure. Because of Elagabalus's position as head priest, their devotion to their god colored nearly every action they took. Supposedly, prior to their rule, a full-body painting of Elagabalus was sent to the Senate House so that Romans would know what they looked like while wearing their Eastern garb. It was instructed that this painting hang above the goddess Victoria so that any offerings to her would also be made to Elagabalus. Elagabalus was known to celebrate everything in excess and live life as hedonistically as possible. They had no desire to sin in secret, but appeared in public with eyes painted and cheeks rouged. These cosmetics marred a face naturally handsome. In the public baths, they always bathed with the women, and they even treated themselves with a depilatory ointment, which they applied also to their own beard, and shameful though it be to say it, in the same place where the women were treated and at the same hour. They would go to the taverns by night, wearing a wig, and there ply the trade of a female huckster. They frequented the notorious brothels, drove out the prostitutes, and played the prostitute themselves. Elagabalus was a huge supporter of sex workers. They bought many sex workers their freedom, they sent them money and gifts and favors, they wanted to learn from them and treated them with great respect. During their 4-year reign, Elagabalus had 3 different wives and up to 2 different husbands, depending on accounts. Their first wife was a woman named Julia Cornelia Paula, married in 219 CE and divorced in 220 CE. The second wife was Julia Aquila Severa, married in 220 CE and divorced in 221 CE. She was a Vestal virgin and sworn to 30 years of celibacy, and this caused a huge public uproar. Elagabalus' grandmother Maisa urged them to divorce for the public image. The third wife was Ennia Aurelia Faustinia, married and divorced in 221 CE. She was a descendant of Marcus Aurelius and was considered a respectable marriage choice. After divorcing Faustinia, Elagabalus remarried Julia Aquila Severia in 221 CE, and they remained together until Elagabalus' death in 222 CE. Elagabalus' first husband was a charioteer named Hierocles, and this was widely regarded as their most successful marriage, as Elagabalus was called Hierocles' wife. When trying someone in court, they really had more or less the appearance of a man, but everywhere else they showed affectations in their actions and in the quality of their voice. For instance, they used to dance, not only in the orchestra, but also in a way even while walking, performing sacrifices, receiving salutations, or delivering a speech. They were bestowed in marriage and was termed wife, mistress, and queen. They worked with wool, sometimes wore a hairnet, and painted their eyes, daubing them with white lead and alkanet. Once, indeed, they shaved their chin and held a festival to mark the event, but after that, they had the hairs plucked out so as to look more like a woman, and they often reclined while receiving the salutations of the senators. The husband of this woman was Hierocles. Elagabalus was so enamored with Hierocles that they wanted to name him Caesar, which caused another huge rift with their grandmother Maisa. Elagabalus' possible second husband was another athlete named Aurelius Zodicus. Supposedly, Elagabalus had staff that would search for well-endowed men to bring them, and this is how Zodicus was found. When Aurelius addressed them with the usual salutation, "My Lord Emperor, hail," they bent their necks so as to assume a ravishing feminine pose, and turning their eyes upon him with a melting gaze, answered without any hesitation, "Call me not Lord, for I am a lady." The account continues that supposedly Hierocles feared being replaced by Zodicus or otherwise losing favor with Elagabalus, and he had Zodicus drugged. When the time for intimacy came, Zodicus couldn't get it up and was exiled. A different and likely slightly more accurate account says that Zodicus and Elagabalus were also wed, with Elagabalus being named the athlete's bride. Zodicus was known to be a respected confidant of Elagabalus, and he would feed false information to the other members of the court in exchange for money. Another unusual facet of Elagabalus' reign was that they established a separate women's senate to meet with their mother and grandmother. They highly valued the opinions of their mother and grandmother, who also became the first two women allowed in the Roman Senate and were able to vote as such. Elagabalus' popularity rapidly declined with the general public, the Senate, and the Praetorian Guard due to their sexual debauchery, religious zealotry, and general disinterestment in Roman tradition. Julia Maisa, Elagabalus' grandmother, acted quickly to have them name their cousin Severus Alexander as their heir. Alexander was the child of Julia Evita Maima, the second daughter of Julia Maisa. Elagabalus suspected that Alexander was favored by the Senate and the Praetorian Guard and tried and failed to have Alexander stripped of his titles, as well as numerous unsuccessful assassination attempts. Eventually, Elagabalus started a rumor that Alexander was deathly ill. This started a riot with the Praetorian Guard and ultimately ended with Alexander ordering the execution of Elagabalus and their mother, Julia Soaemias. Elagabalus and Soaemias were beheaded, their bodies stripped naked, dragged through the streets, dumped in the sewers, and eventually thrown into the Tiber River. Elagabalus was 18. The practice of damnatio memoriae, meaning damnation of memory, the process of excluding a person from official accounts, was put into effect, striking Elagabalus' name and likeness from record. I want to talk about the sources we have for Elagabalus' life and why their gender is so highly debated. We have three primary sources to reference Elagabalus. The first being the Historia Augusta, a collection of biographies of Roman emperors, rulers, elite figures, written sometime in the 4th century, so nearly 100 years after Elagabalus' death. The author or authors of Historia Augusta are widely debated, and it's likely that the bulk of the information written about Elagabalus was done in a way to win favor with Alexander. The bulk of the discussion of Elagabalus in Historia Augusta is anecdotes about the perverse and excessive aspects of their reign. Our second source is Herodian, who was a contemporary to Elagabalus, but his writing is very blunt and considered unnuanced, and the information is often inaccurate. However, Herodian has some of the best information about the religious reforms put into place by Elagabalus. The third and final primary source is written by historian Cassius Dio, who also lived during Elagabalus' time. Dio was a lifelong civil servant and absolutely despised everything about Elagabalus. The majority of the information we have about Elagabalus comes from Dio's account, even though it has been proven to be embellished and just factually wrong in order to make Elagabalus look bad. They carried their lewdness to such a point that they asked the physicians to contrive a woman's vagina in their body by means of an incision, promising them large sums for doing so. Many modern-day historians caution taking Dio's account at face value due to his proven inaccuracies and his known hatred for Elagabalus. Because of this, some say that Dio's depiction of Elagabalus's gender identity is intended as a character assassination rather than something written in good faith. In my opinion, as a trans person, we don't get a lot of people writing about us in good faith. Despite that, being trans isn't a bad thing, no matter what anyone says. Just because people don't like us doesn't mean we don't exist. Also, from reading the primary sources myself, I gathered that Elagabalus's gender identity was one of the least pressing concerns about them. Dio seemed to have a much bigger problem with Elagabalus defying traditional Roman religious beliefs and their general sexual proclivity rather than their feminine behavior. Herodian barely mentions Elagabalus's gender, instead focusing criticism heavily on their religious zealotry. The vast majority of the Historia Augusta account is about the author's distaste for Elagabalus's overindulgence. Concerning their life, many filthy anecdotes have been put into writing, but since they are not worthy of being recorded, I have thought I ought to relate only such deeds as illustrate their extravagance. It then continues for 16 pages describing these deeds. I really hope I did justice to Elagabalus' story. I think every video like this has to leave a lot of information out for the sake of time, so I encourage you all to read the primary sources and continue your own research if you're interested. Thank you all so much for joining me in learning about Elagabalus, a Roman emperor and trans figure of history. If you enjoyed watching, please feel free to like, comment, share, subscribe. It helps me out a ton, and I really loved making this video. I would love to make more videos like this in the future. For all my fellow trans folks, remember, we have always been here. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Goodbye. I also have a couple fun facts that I had no idea where to put them in this video. So here we go. The North Herefordshire Museum in Hitchin, north of London, has a Roman coin featuring Elagabalus, and in November 2023, they revised all of their display information to use she/her pronouns to refer to Elagabalus. That's cool. Elagabalus often compared himself to Venus and dressed as the goddess during ceremonies and, most notably, a play about the story of Paris. That specific anecdote is definitely worth reading about because, oh my god. Elagabalus loved the circus and chariot racing and built the Amphitheatrum Castrense to house the Circus Varianus. This is where they loved to race chariots, and it was also where they met Heracles. Okay, how do I put this last one so that it's okay for the video? Elagabalus was a fan of consensual BDSM with Hierocles. Kinky. Elagabal. Who boy these names? Elagabal. Fuck. Elagabalus. Elagabalus served blah, 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 where Elagabalus is fuck. Fuck. That was the worst paragraph.